Well, we're back talking about the Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe again. Because I'm a hunter. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of what might be the final nail in the coffin of this cinematic universe, Kraven the Hunter. So, for those that don't know, about 6 years ago, Sony decided to spin off a lot of the Spider-Man villains into their own universe. We had Venom kick this thing off, then we followed it up with some Venom sequels, obviously. We had Morbius, we had Madam Web earlier this year, and now we have Kraven the Hunter. And the initial idea, the thing that was pitched, that I actually thought was a brilliant idea for Sony to do, is that we're going to build out this universe, flesh out this Sony Spider-Man universe with all these villains, have all these lived-in characters and all these storylines going on, so that if and when we get Spider-Man back, we won't have to take all the time in all these individual Spider-Man movies building out all these characters. We'll be able to just launch into things like Sinister Six. And if they had executed it even mildly competently, that really would have worked. Unfortunately, with almost no exception, this Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe has been the most incompetently handled, baffling, most devoid of value cinematic universe that we have gotten yet.
You suck, you jackass.
I thought Venom was okay. The Venom sequels didn't do a whole lot for me. Morbius was terrible. Madam Web is one of the worst films I've ever seen. And Kraven the Hunter now joining the fucking fight to be in my bottom 10 of the year. So yeah, guys, to absolutely nobody's surprise, this movie is awful. I'm going to get into all the reasons why it is awful, try to find maybe a few redeeming factors about it, and I'm going to need a hunter myself to be able to find those redeeming factors. But the only saving grace to all of this, for all of the time that we have wasted watching these movies, talking about these movies, for those of us that make content, creating content about these movies, there was a report that was more on the rumor side now. It hasn't been officially announced. Obviously, Sony wouldn't do that until Kraven the Hunter finishes its theatrical run, that this is potentially the final movie in this universe, at least for now. So perhaps they're finally coming to their senses. Time will tell. But really quick, before we get into all of the ugly nitty-gritty of Kraven the Hunter, while a lot of you are probably going to be fueling yourself with some alcoholic drinks to go and enjoy this film, be sure to check out the sponsor of today's video to make sure that you enjoy the day after by using ZBiotics. The holidays are here, which means many of us will be attending Christmas parties, award ceremonies, or just enjoying our time off of work by curling up on the couch with our favorite drink. And while I rarely drink anymore, I remember vividly how a morning after a night of drinking would feel. You might as well cancel that entire day. Well, with ZBiotics pre-alcohol, you'll be able to enjoy Christmas Eve festivities without feeling terrible on Christmas morning. ZBiotics pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic that was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. The problem when you drink is that a toxic byproduct builds up in your gut that your body is not naturally good at breaking down. It's this byproduct and not dehydration that causes your rough next day. And pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that helps to break this byproduct down. Just make ZBiotics pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep, and you'll wake up feeling refreshed, ready to take on whatever the day throws at you. So if you want to enjoy the holidays without suffering the next days, click the link in the video description to get 15% off of your first order at checkout. Plus, ZBiotics offers a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. And thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring today's video. So let's start with the positives of Kraven the Hunter. I mean, the action sequences are okay. They're not great. They're not terrible. There's a mild amount of excitement in there. The fact that it's rated R, I mean, it feels kind of superfluous. It feels like it was just digitally added later. I don't think they shot this thing with the intention of it being rated R. Obviously, there was some swear words in the script all throughout the movie, but those are very easily handled, especially when you're using ADR like a motherfucker anyway. So the action sequences of Kraven tearing up multiple people, bouncing around cars, running across the walls like a werewolf, they're fine. They're okay. I've seen much better. I've seen much worse. I think that Aaron Taylor Johnson could have been a great Kraven in an actual proper Spider-Man movie. I think he's got the physicality for it. I think that he's got the look for it. I think that there's obviously something that he likes and sees in this character that made him sign on to this thing. So I don't mind him in the role. I don't think that what he gives us is the best version by any stretch of his version of Kraven the Hunter that we could have gotten. I think most of that is on the writing and the direction, but he's fine. And other people in the cast, namely Russell Crowe, despite it being very corny and over the top, I think he added something with his presence here. He adds a little bit of legitimacy to this. Maybe. And while I cannot personally endorse this because unfortunately I saw this in a theater with like 3 other people that I did not know, and with the exception of the person in the row in front of me who was on their phone the entire movie, which I didn't even care. That tells you how much I gave a fuck about this movie. Aside from that person, everybody else was silent. I have heard from numerous people that I know and trust that this is a type of movie, if you go with some rowdy friends or if you see it in a theater with the right crowd where everybody's there ready to laugh at this movie, it can be a lot of unintentional fun. This can be a very so bad that it's good type of experience. I didn't have that. I wish I could have. I wish I could have seen this in a rowdy crowd, and maybe I would have gotten more enjoyment out of it, even if it's for the wrong reasons. But if you have a group of friends that love to make fun of bad movies, or if you have a critics group or somebody that you watch movies with that you know could get into something like this, there could be some entertainment value in that for you. Moving on to the negatives. I mean, it's like par for the course at this point. Like, Sony's Villainverse has been just one after another, after another, after another of the same exact mind-blowingly incompetent filmmaking issues that I don't honestly believe that this is accidental. Like, I want to really put some chips onto the table and bet that at some point, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there's going to be some report that gets leaked, or there's going to be some interview that happens where we're going to find out that some major exec at Sony had a bone to pick. He didn't get the bonus that he wanted, or fucking didn't get his time off or something. And so he decided to sabotage an entire cinematic universe to give the big fuck you to Sony. There's got to be some explanation for that out there. Somebody that has purposely made these movies as bad as they are for some fathomable reason out there. I don't know what that reason is, but there's got to be an explanation. You cannot accidentally miss this many times in a row and do the same exact issues this many times in a row without some sort of explanation. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Sony's Villainverse is never fucking right. First of all, let's just start with the concept. You can't just make a spin-off movie with any character and expect it to work just because they're a recognizable name for comic book fans. Like, Kraven the Hunter's not even a villain on the level of Venom, where they have this pop culture iconic sense to them where they can sustain a standalone movie and even a franchise, even if they're terrible, and make a pretty decent chunk of change. Kraven the Hunter is a villain that we have yet to see until this weekend make it into a live-action film. You have the video game that came out last year that I thought was fantastic. That's really the most mainstream thing that we have gotten from Kraven the Hunter outside of just the comic books. And so characters like Kraven the Hunter and Morbius and Madam Web, if you're going to do a standalone movie with them, you have to have a story, a point, an idea of the genesis of this entire thing that is going to merit its existence, that's going to say, hey, here's why Kraven is such a great character. He needs to have his own story so that when he teams up with Spider-Man, we don't have to spend all the time getting into his backstory. He'll be this deep, rich, interesting character, and then we can just get right into the fighting between these two iconic characters. And they don't do that at all with any of these movies, possibly least of which with Kraven the Hunter. What is the story here? He gets powers because he was attacked by a lion. Some chick puts some witch doctor venom into his fucking gullet, and now he has animal instincts, and he finds out some people are like poaching animals, and so he has a list of people that he wants to kill, and he's a little pissed off at his father. That's the story. That's the tale. That's the narrative that we are going on that merited its own fucking existence that cost over $100 million. Why? The story that they chose to go with this movie is so bland and uninteresting that they had to like rework the structure of the film to try to make it feel like there's some flow to getting this to 90 minutes. Like, you have this random cold open of this prison break that is a decent enough sequence, but really doesn't make any sense as a cold open to this film. Then you revert back to teenage Kraven for like 25 fucking minutes of this movie and just get into daddy issues. And then it goes back to Aaron Taylor Johnson, and it's just him walking around telling everybody, I'm a hunter. I hunt things. I'm a hunter. There's nothing here to justify this character having its own story if this is all you're going to give us. You could have given a 5-minute cold open in a proper Spider-Man sequel with Kraven as one of or the main villain of the film, and a proper script with a proper director would have given more interest and more gravitas to this character in 5 minutes than this entire fucking film does in over 90 minutes. And yet again, you get a movie like this that feels like it just misses the point of what is interesting about this character. Kraven is not interesting for like supernatural animalistic powers, and I'm sure there's iterations of the character that's a thing, but the Kraven that I know is just a really badass hunter. He's just a dude, but he's so cunning, he's so diabolical, he's so smart that he's one of Spider-Man's greatest villains because of his intellect, not because of his glowing eyes and his fucking focus powers and being able to run on the wall like a goddamn werewolf. So even with that direction, you completely fumble what is interesting about this character. He's just yet another dude with powers. The dialogue in this movie is absolutely atrocious, and it really is the point where you're going to get a lot of genuine laughs in the theater if you have the right crowd, because some of it is just so unbelievably incompetent that all you can do is laugh uncomfortably at some of this. As I've already said, there's like 16 points in the film where they ask Kraven something like, why are you here? How'd you find this out? What is your thing going on here? Like, what is your purpose here? And it's always some variation of, I'm a hunter. Russell Crowe, every single scene that he gets, he's just waxing away about power, like, I am a powerful figure, and I cannot show weakness, because then I will not have power anymore. I will cease to be powerful. And then there's a ton of moments in here where you just go, how the fuck did this moment make it through not only drafts of a script, but being shot, being edited, and a round of reshoots? How is this your best effort? There is a scene where the main villain of the film, Rhino, is like off to the side of the shot, looking out a window, and one of his cronies comes in, and he's like, Sir, Kraven the Hunter still lives. And he just stares out the window and does this. And this isn't like a tick that he has throughout the movie. This isn't something that he ever does before or after this. This isn't a part of his like hardened skin condition in this iteration of Rhino. It's just some random fucking hairball moment that I watched and I went, what the fuck was that? And it takes a special kind of bad to take literal Oscar-winning actors and even Oscar-caliber, Oscar-nominated actors and force them to give the worst possible performance that actor is capable of, which is pretty much everything that you can say about every single cast member in this movie. I don't know how much of that is just the way that they were directed. I don't know how much of that is like possibly the studio telling them to be bad for some whatever fucking reason that these movies end up being so horrible. I don't know if it's because they do so many reshoots and they retinker and retool these movies so much that eventually the actors just cease to give a fuck, and that's usually the take that we see on screen. We pretty much had that confirmed for a lot of the actors in Madam Web. They were just like, look, whatever. Like, Sydney Sweeney didn't even try to hide it. She's like, look, I fucking did that shit so that I could make Immaculate. Sorry you had to deal with that, but it was a necessary evil. And it's that point alone that it's probably a good thing that Sony just goes ahead and just go ahead, put the final bullet in this franchise, in this cinematic universe, because I don't know what actor that actually gives a shit about their reputation would sign on to do a Sony villain spinoff at this point after the last 3 or 4 films that they were in. Like, what that does to an actor's reputation, I don't know. Maybe it does nothing if they followed up with a great film, but when you see something like this, something like Madam Web, something like Morbius, I feel like you gotta have some kind of a negative effect to your career. I don't think there's anybody left that would want to roll the dice on that when they know that the 90% chance they're gonna come up fucking goose egg. And since I brought up reshoots, this is yet again another example where it is blatantly obvious that this thing has just been hacked to death and reshot to death and rewritten to death. That was obvious in Morbius. It was blatantly obvious with Madam Web, and now it's obvious again here. I don't think it's quite as egregious as Madam Web, even though that's a pretty fucking low floor. But there's all kinds of scenes that feels like these actors weren't even in the same room as each other because there's just no chemistry. There's no like connection going on between these dialogue exchanges. There's a ton of dialogue in here where you see like the back of a character's head as a line is being thrown out, which tells you immediately that was ADR that was added in later. All kinds of things throughout here. Even the way that the story is structured just feels like they had no idea what the fuck to do, and so they just threw all of the scenes and footage they had into like a randomizer and came out with a film and just tinkered it until it was presentable. I mean, this movie was supposed to come out like a year ago, and they did a year of extra work on it. More reshoots, more editing to make it a better version of itself. What was the worst version? What was the original version that was unacceptable that this is the better version? That's what the fuck I want to know. And then yet again, another issue that has riddled the vast majority, well, pretty much the entirety of these films is no mention, no hints whatsoever at Spider-Man or where Spider-Man is or how we're going to integrate Spider-Man at some point. Like, we're what, 6 films into this little side universe here that was initially pitched as something that it's going to be breeding this home for Spider-Man to come home to. And I can't think of one legitimate moment in these 6 films that actually gives us some kind of an inkling at how Spider-Man would eventually integrate into all of this bullshit. They did it for a moment in a post-credit scene, and I think the second Venom film. And then the very next actual proper Spider-Man film fucking retconned the shit out of that immediately. Kevin Feige was like, hell no. No, keep that fucking dumpster fire away from us. Which just leaves all the actual Spider-Man fans and the old school fans of these characters that they're adapting going, what is the point? Why are we here? What are we doing? Can you do a villain standalone movie and not mention the hero that they are tied to in the comics? I guess. I mean, even Joker kind of mentioned Batman, but Joker's a fucking anomaly that not even everybody loves. You can't do that with all of them. Some of these characters aren't as interesting as Joker. They don't have as much going for them as Joker to be able to sustain an entire storyline, be it a television series or a standalone movie, without having some kind of link to the character that they are there to be against. If we're being honest, the DC universe is the only place where they have somewhat figured out how to do this. I really enjoyed the first Joker, not the second one, and I thought the Penguin was incredible. The Penguin's an even better example, actually, because they don't even really mention Batman except for the final shot of that entire series. They had 8 episodes of totally compelling storyline that makes you so interested in that character, whether or not they eventually get back with their hero or not. We could do a whole second season of Penguin without Batman, and I'm totally there for it. You ain't doing that with this. Sony is doing anything but that with all of these movies. They're just fucking throwing shit at the wall and not a damn thing is sticking. And ultimately what just frustrates the shit out of me about this entire universe is not because they're just worthless. And by the way, if you enjoy these films, if you get some enjoyment out of them, I'm not putting down your taste in movies. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm glad you get some kind of enjoyment out of them. I envy you. But in general, even those that can find some appreciation in these movies could probably agree to some point that these movies, this universe as a whole at least, has been a gigantic fumble. And what frustrates me so much is that we're in a state now where comic book films are on a bit of shaky ground. I think that we're eventually going to get back to some golden times here soon. But we're on a bit of shaky ground where the DC universe failed and rebooted itself. We have yet to see what that's going to turn into. We'll find out next year. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been, with a few exceptions, on a very down note over the last couple of years. You have this Sony Spider-Man universe that's just been miss after miss after miss. Like, we're in a time where I don't want these movies to come out because all it does is make the overall subgenre worse. Most of the people out there are not nerds like me and like most of you watching this that is tied into the movie news and watches the trailers and knows all the ins and outs of what's going on behind the scenes and reshoots and all this other stuff. They just see a trailer to a movie that looks good to them, and almost every single one of them that walks into a Kraven the Hunter or a Morbius or a Madam Web is going to go, my God, that fucking sucked. Comic book movies are terrible now. I'm not going to another one for a year. And then you have them miss out on any ones that are actually decent or good, which hopefully we have a lot of those on the horizon. But this year, we've had 3. We've had Madam Web, we've had Venom the Last Dance, and we have had Kraven the Hunter, none of which I thought were very good. Venom Last Dance was okay. The other 2 are god-awful. And it just puts the entire industry, the entire subgenre in a worse spot. For what gain? For what purpose? How the studio that gave us some of my personal favorite comic book films of all time in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, and delivered Amazing Spider-Man, which is pretty solid, that delivered the Spider-Verse films that have been wildly acclaimed, both of them. How the same studio that produces those simultaneously is producing this dumpster fire bullshit maddens me to no end. Are they not communicating? Are there not the same studio execs or producers or talking heads involved with these different projects? Is the Spider-Verse people not also in the same building at some point with the motherfuckers that are greenlighting Madam Web and saying, hey, I've got some notes for you? I just don't get it. So I don't know. There's not really much else to say about this. Is Kraven the Hunter a good movie? Absolutely not. It fails on basically every single level. Could I understand somebody having some so bad that it's good enjoyment out of it? Absolutely. If you're with the right company, if you're with the right crowd, I could totally see that. Unfortunately, I did not have that, so I can't even come on here and laugh about how great of a time I had laughing at this movie. It was just 90 minutes that I'll never get back that I wish I could have given to anything else but this. Movies that cost this much, that get this level of marketing, that are going to get whatever amount of financial return that they do and don't deserve a single dime of any of it. I'm just over talking about these types of movies. So I hope these reports are true. I hope this universe dies a quick death after this film. And if they ever revisit it, I hope they take a giant hard look in the mirror and realize they fumbled this worse than I have ever seen anything. Like, DC and WB are elated the fact that this universe exists, because up until this year, they were easily the laughing stock as far as how to execute a cinematic comic book universe. And I'll tell you what, for as many mistakes and as many bafflingly incompetent decisions that Warner Brothers made with the DCEU, they look like fucking geniuses compared to what Sony has churned out in this Villainverse. So all in all, guys, spend your time and your money on anything else. There's a lot of great films that are in theaters right now. Save it for next week when you have Sonic and Mufasa coming out. Hopefully those will be better. Save it for 2 weeks for when Nosferatu comes out, which is unbelievably better than this one. Anything else, spend that money on donating it to somebody. Do not give a dime to this film. If you're interested in it, if you like these movies and you want to give it a shot and form your own opinion, of course, I champion that every single time, but this is one of those few times, like a Jeepers Creepers Reborn, like the first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, like Madam Web, that I'm going to encourage you to spend your time and money on anything else, because the level of quality that this thing brings and expects you to pay to experience is just absolutely unacceptable. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Please check out ZBiotics in the video description below. Click over here for my 2024 new release reviews, and click up here for a playlist of all of these Sony bullshit Spider-Villainverse movies that I reviewed, which are all of them, unfortunately. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. Maybe I'll do a ranking of these and bitch just one more time before we put this thing to bed. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.